The air hummed with the resonance of 1,000 dying stars as the Dominion Accord warships tore through the fabric of space directly above Varela Station. Reality didn't just bend, it fractured. Jalen Rowe felt the static charge lifting the hair on his arms, a blinding white radiance pouring from the cracks in the sky. He pressed his back against the vibrating hull of his clinic. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Beneath his blood-stained hands, the Sovereign gasped, her skin glowing with a brilliant, pulsing silver light. If they wanted her, they would have to step over a man who had forgotten how to be afraid. 6 hours earlier, the station had been nothing more than a quiet, dust-ringed hub drifting on the edge of the galaxy. Jalen Rowe preferred the periphery. On Varela, he was just a name on a flickering neon sign. An ex-field medic who asked no questions and patched up the miners and drifters who fell through the cracks of the core congregate's rigid society. His clinic was a sanctuary of humming monitors and the sharp, clean scent of medical-grade cleansers. He lived by a simple rule: if it breathes, you help it. History often pivots not on heroes but on healers, though Jalen would have laughed at the suggestion. He was just a man with steady hands and a stubborn streak that ran deeper than the station's cooling vents. The sensor at the door chimed, a frantic, high-pitched warble that sliced through the low thrum of the station's life support. Then came the crash. A figure staggered across the threshold, draped in a cloak of fractal shimmer that seemed to catch and refract every stray beam of light in the room. It was the Seraph of the First Weavers. Jalen didn't know her name then, only that she was a vision of shattered majesty, her movements fluid yet desperate. She collapsed into his arms, and the impact sent a jolt of pure energy through his chest. It wasn't just weight, it was a magnetic pull, an instantaneous connection that defied logic. Her skin was warm, vibrant with a hidden power, but she was bleeding. Not red, but a liquid, glowing silver that stained his sleeves and pooled on the floor like fallen stars. Silver blood, human hands. The contrast was a vivid strike against the mundane walls of his clinic. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a melody of multiple tones that vibrated in his very marrow. Jalen didn't hesitate. He guided her to the nearest surgical bed, his movements practiced and swift. As he worked, the air around them began to shimmer, responding to her presence. The electric shock of accidental touch flared every time his fingers brushed her skin to apply the dermal seals. He felt her gaze, a deep and ancient intelligence, searching his face, finding only the fierce, protective instinct of a man who refused to turn away. The medic who mended a god. It was a title he hadn't asked for, but one he would bleed to keep. "You are light years from your kind," he said, his voice low and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Why come here?" "Because mercy lives in the quiet places," she replied, her hand reaching out to steady his. The proximity was overwhelming, a heat that radiated between them as he worked. He saw the way the light in her eyes flickered, the fragility of a sovereign who had been hunted across the void. Compassion can shift civilizations when strength cannot, and in that moment, Jalen knew that his small, dusty clinic had become the center of something that would change the galaxy forever. Empires trembled when mercy spoke, and the tremors were starting right here. The metal hull groaned under the weight of the Dominion Accord's gravitational anchors. Jalen Rowe didn't flinch. He adjusted the power flow to the clinic's stabilizers, his hand steady despite the blur of motion outside the viewport. The warships were massive, sleek monoliths of power, their presence cracking reality itself in a display of sheer, unyielding force. They didn't come for parley. They came to reclaim their prize. Seraph leaned against him, her weight a grounding force. The fractal shimmer of her cloak pulsed in sync with his own heartbeat. The magnetic pull between them was undeniable, now a tether forged in the heat of a desperate hour. He could feel the vibration of the station's engines through the soles of his boots, a low growl of defiance. The terrifying relief of seeing her stand, even as the walls trembled, fueled a fire in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "They will destroy everything to have me," she whispered, her voice a golden resonance against the roar of the descending ships. "Let them try," Jalen replied, gritting his teeth as the primary airlock buckled. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to hold a line. He stood between the door and the sovereign, his medical kit swapped for a high-output kinetic welder. The electricity of proximity between them was a physical weight, a charge that made the air taste of ozone and possibility. The airlock shattered. White light flooded the room, blinding and hot. Soldiers of the Dominion Accord stepped through the haze, their armor reflecting the silver blood still staining Jalen's hands. But as they leveled their weapons, the world didn't explode. It stopped. The seraph of the first Weavers stepped forward, her hand brushing Jalen's arm, a final electric shock of connection that seemed to ground the entire station. She didn't strike out with fire. Instead, she awakened. A wave of pure, crystalline clarity radiated from her, halting time in a single breathless moment. The soldiers froze like statues. The warships in the sky became silent, hovering icons of a dead era. The very atoms of the station seemed to sing in a new frequency. She looked at Jalen, her eyes reflecting the infinite potential of 1,000 futures. One medic's refusal to turn away has rewritten the stars, she said. Her voice didn't just fill the room. It broadcasted across every frequency in the galaxy, a message of power rooted in empathy. She named humanity her equal, not because of their weapons or their empires, but because of their capacity for mercy. In that moment, the core congregate's grip on the universe began to slip, replaced by a surge of hope that traveled faster than any lightspeed drive. The warships eventually retreated, their mission rendered obsolete by a sovereign who had found something greater than a throne. Varela Station remained a dust-ringed hub on the edge of the galaxy, but it was no longer a place of exile. It became the heart of change, a beacon for those who believe that ordinary acts create extraordinary ripples in unstable systems. Jalen Rowe stayed on Varela. He still wears the stains of silver light on his coat, and he still patches the wounds of those the rest of the galaxy forgets. He works in the quiet heat of the station, his hands still steady, his heart still tethered to the Weaver who changed everything. The galaxy rewrote itself in whispers of compassion and defiance, born from a single room where a healer stood his ground. History had pivoted, and as Jalen looked out at the stars, he knew the ripples were only just beginning. Would you like me to generate a cinematic image of Jalen and Seraph standing together as the Dominion warships retreat?